This is the cab from a 1979 Chevy K10 square body. We've been working through sheet metal for the last couple of months. Recently added some Bondo. I think I've welded more sheet metal in the last 2 months than I have in my entire life. In fact, without a doubt, I've welded more sheet metal. We replaced rocker panels, the entire firewall, inner rockers, and some fabrication on the inside around the foot kick panels and vents, the whole thing. And I thought we were pretty well done with the sheet metal work until I removed the back window and saw that when the rubber came out, the rust became obvious. So that needs some serious attention. In pro land, they might remove that whole back section. I don't know. In everyday land, we're going to take just enough to get a structural point back, removing the rust that just can't hold anything. So I've made some lines where I anticipate cutting, trying to keep it just straight. But I think I'm actually going to take the wire wheel to it for a minute and just make sure that that cut will be deep enough, especially down here. And then we'll cut it out and make a sheet to put it back. So we have our wire wheel on our grinder. We got safety glasses on and we're wearing some gloves. We're just going to hit that a little bit to make sure that we remove any of the compromised material. Well, darn it. That's a little worse right there than I'd hoped. So back here, this right here is pretty much a straight line. That shouldn't be too difficult. But inside, I'm a little bit nervous about finishing the sheet metal in here where there's some curves. Let's see if I can get an angle on that. Right in there, things are compromised more than I'd like. We're going to have to cut a little deeper and make some pieces fit in there somehow. I'll figure it out. I'm using a cutoff wheel, this metal angle grinder diamond blade cutoff wheel. I've used these aluminum oxide and I don't know what else they make them from, graphite and carbon and whatever else, and they're fine. They wear out pretty quick and often chip or break when you put just a little bit of a torque or an angle on it. So they're fine and they're cheap and you just go through them. This one, like I have 2 of these and I'm still on the first. After all the grinding and cutting and everything we've done on this and other things, it just keeps on going. So I'm pretty happy with it. Anyway, I got one of those on the angle grinder, so we're going to cut out this old metal. I think I'm going to do this part one at a time. Rather than cut through here where there's some curve and shape to get that metal out, I think I'm going to rebuild this piece first so that I have a solid reference before I cut that out. That's probably the cautious way to do it. I need a piece that will fit. Actually 2 pieces. We'll take one with an angle up from the base around here and then up here And then we'll do another piece on the inside. This is doubled up. You can see where they've stamped the two pieces of sheet metal together. But the sheet metal that's here is probably good, like a 20 or 22 gauge. What I have in there is 18, so I may not need to double up. And since I'm not stamping it together the way they did anyway, I'll be using a MIG welder. Probably I'll have one piece go all the way up, and then the second piece would just bring it together on the inside. So we need something 9 inches by, it goes up to that first corner. What is that? About 9/16 to the corner, and then another half, inch and a 16th, and then another half. So if we cut that at, we can always chop it off later, huh? Cut it at 1. That's a big half, 9/16. That's a solid half, and that's a half. Let's cut one at 1 3/4. We'll put a couple of bends in it, let it run long on the top, chop it off later. In Pro-Land, they have all sizes and shapes and gauges of sheet metal. In Everyday Joe Land, we just got what we have. You got it on what you brung. So out here on the edge of this piece of stock, it's all 18 gauge. I've noticed that the one edge isn't square, so I marked that first, making sure that I have at least 1 3/4 all the way through. It's okay to let it run long because I can chop it off later after it's welded on there and get it right where I want it. My objective is really just to get a 9 by 1 3/4 plus piece out of this, and with any luck I'll leave a little more of a square edge. That's it right down in there. What we need is a bend. In this case, having the bend be a little bit, leaving this end a little bit short is probably okay. I can fill that gap with the welder. Leaving it a little bit long though means I have to trim that off, which wouldn't be the end of the world either. I'll err just a little bit short, I think. Cut that off somewhere like that. We'll make our first bend and then see about the second. If you do much sheet metal work, I actually don't do a lot, but I figured, I think this brake was, I don't know, $35 or something, I don't even remember. After doing a couple of things, mostly those inner rocker panels, by hand, using an assortment of clamps and hammers and different braces and metal and tubes and boards, and after fighting through the first one, I decided it would be worth the investment of whatever it was. $35, I think. I should probably find out before I say anything. And admittedly, the thing is pretty sweet in its simplicity. There's just not much to it. And I looked at some of the more complicated metal brakes, wondering if this might become a more common habit, but not only are they more expensive, but they're bulky, they take up a lot of space. So look, if you're doing a lot of sheet metal work, by all means, I think that'd be a great thing to have. I'd definitely own it. I'm trying to decide if I'd do enough sheet metal work to justify this little cheap one. So there we have that bend in place for the first go. We'll go see what that looks like, make a mark for the second bend, and go from there. We have the piece cut. We have the piece shaped, at least reasonably well. Close enough. Maybe not for a pro, but for the everyday Joe. So what we're going to do is tack that thing on there. The goal is to attach it where it's flush with the original, and then places like out here where it's been out just a tad too much, we can push in before we tack it, and then when we're all done we can cut that off to be the right height. I just have a couple of magnets on the back side holding that in place, which should be sufficient. Good news about this particular piece is that it will not be very visible. The weather stripping covers up pretty much everything all the way down to that line right there. So as long as we get that weld cleaned up well, which mostly we'll do with the grinder anyway, we should be in good shape. Well, I would never claim to be a professional welder by any stretch, but I will tell you, the sheet metal welding has got to be the trickiest stuff I've ever done. As a result, my movements become a little bit erratic when I'm trying to avoid burning through. And the end result looks scabby as all get out. But, how does the saying go? A grinder and some paint makes a welder what he ain't.